So, Dr. Peter Rhee is a nationally renowned trauma surgeon who is most well known for being attending for U.S. Representative Gabriel Giffords following the 2011 Tucson shooting. For his leadership and excellent quality of patient care he provided, he received accolades from all over the nation, including from President Obama. As a Georgia Tech alumnus, Dr. Rhee recently returned to Atlanta to serve as the Chief of Surgery at Grady Memorial Hospital and Medical Director of Marcos Trauma Center. When Dr. Bryce Choi offered to connect KAMSA of Georgia to Dr. Peter Rhee, we couldn't pass upon this opportunity. He is not only one of the most successful Korean American surgeons in America, but well recognized and respected by all Americans. Previously, Dr. Rhee held appointments as Chief of Trauma, Critical Care, and Burn Emergency Surgery at University of Arizona College of Medicine, Director of the Navy Trauma Training Center located at Los Angeles County Medical Center, University of Southern California, and Professor of Surgery at the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences. Regarding his academic background, after receiving BS in Health Systems Engineering from Georgia Tech, Dr. Rhee received an MD degree from UShoes. He then completed his residency in general surgery at UC Irvine and a fellowship in trauma and critical care at University of Washington. He also attained NPH and additional trainings for medical care of catastrophes. He is double-boarded in general surgery and surgical critical care. Dr. Rhee is a retired U.S. Navy captain following 24 years of active duty with numerous shipboard deployments and with the U.S. Marines. He has served in Afghanistan and Iraq during Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Rocky Freedom. Having published over 300 papers and over 20 books, chapters, and books, Dr. Rhee holds a great passion for academic medicine and furthering our understanding of the sciences behind medicine. A few of his many greatest research contributions include fluid resuscitation in hemorrhagic patients, development of wireless vital signs, quick clot for management of acute bleeding, establishment of more accessible blood banks near combat zones, and to many one of the surprising advances in modern medicine, suspended animation, where we may be able to extend the precious time of critical intervention by significantly lowering the temperature of mortally injured trauma patients. He is also the author of the book Trauma Red, Making of the Surgeon in War in America's Cities. Despite the innumerable lifetime achievements that only a few may reach, Dr. Rhee uses his platform to speak for those who may have a smaller voice, such as giving recognition to all those who have lost their lives or suffered from the 2011 Tucson shooting, and the larger number of individuals who continue to lose their lives to senseless gun violence in inner cities. He is an advocate for bigger societal issues, such as improved funding of trauma treatment, sensible gun control study, and prevention of gun violence and suicide prevention. He has an essential drive to always challenge himself, all in the benefits of providing better care of medical services to his community, just as he did building up a new program at the time, Navy Trauma Training Center at County USC, then the Trauma Department at University Medical Center in Tucson. These respectable goals and achievements are exemplary of what aspiring health professionals should strive for. We invited to share his biography and insights on medicine, such that all of our audience, medical students, prospective medical students, and everybody in the audience may be inspired by his motivation and honorable goals. I believe that better understanding the mind of the successful person can better all of us in improving ourselves and serving our community. And I want to introduce Dr. Choi for the final words on.
한국말로 제가 좀 말씀 더 드리겠습니다. 영어를 계속 했기 때문에 닥터 리께서는 아주 훌륭하시고 아주 유명하신 분이에요, 사실. 제가 내셔널 카바라고 이 전체 한인 의사회 거기서도 몇 번씩 와서 게스트 스피커로 이렇게 렉처 해주시고 아마 인스파이레이션 많이 받으실 겁니다. 트라우마 서저리라는 거는 서저리 외과 중에서도 예를 들어서 교통사고 나가지고 그냥 여러 분이 상해가지고 막 출혈되고 사람이 살지 못할 그런 상황에서 살려내고 그런 아주 위독한 그런 환자들을 구해내는 아주 그냥 제일 힘든 그런 설주래요. 그걸 갖다가 미국에서도 아주 권위자십니다. 그래서 여기 이렇게 오셨는데 잘 경청해주고 닥터 Rhee 아주 훌륭한 것이니까 아주 귀한 오퍼추니티입니다. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. I know we're running a little behind. Maybe I'll have to go a little faster so we can get done. I think there's some things in this video presentation and this talk that might be a little bit frightful for some who are not accustomed to medicine and blood. And I see there's young children here as well. So a little warning on this. Okay. So the question is, how do I start from Korea to come to Atlanta? So I'm going to try to do this in a very short time period and give you an idea of one person's life as a physician. I think that the main thing that I'll probably say is that I'm not that highly motivated of a person. I'm not that special of a person. But my life was different. And I think that I didn't know that my life was going to turn out the way it did. So I work here at Grady Hospital. It's downtown here. It's a public hospital. And it's one of the few hospitals that's a public hospital in the state of Georgia. And it's probably, it's in the top 3-4 largest public hospital in the United States. And that means that we don't necessarily make money on patients, but we're there to serve. So it's really a privilege for me to be able to have a job where I can go to a place and not concentrate on money, but just serving the community. The trauma center is called the Bernie Marcus Trauma Center because this guy, at the age of 50, got fired from his job in the hardware store and opened up Home Depot. And now he's a multi-billionaire, and he's donating money and philanthropic activities to the university.
Welcome to Atlanta. Welcome to Atlanta and the Grady Trauma Center.
It's a very crowded place where I work. We have only 15 beds, but we have at this time 33 patients. This is last night that we were there. We have to put multiple people in the room because the hospital is so overcrowded. The trauma center is actually new. We just built this within the last 10 years. So the facilities are actually nicer than
And we also have a blood home here.
We have 4 positives and 4 negatives.
It's kind of quiet because it's 6:30 in the morning, usually our lull period. And we have additional hallway patient beds as well, and hallway patient.
Maybe even better if we have 60 beds.
Yes, always.
We are currently holding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 safety patients.
All right, we'll make some beds.
And then the trauma center is next to the emergency room, and this is the emergency room itself. Again, you can see how overcrowded it is, people in the hallways and the beds. It's not the ideal type of setting, and you probably wouldn't do that in a private practice hospital. But we are the city's safety net, and when there's people in need, they come, and we accept and see everybody. So what am I going to talk about today? I'm going to talk a little bit about the military, so you have an idea, a feeling for why I got into the military and what it did for me. I'll talk a lot about traveling. I never knew that as a physician I would be traveling as much as I do. I'll talk about my top 10 best ways to travel, which is just a little humorous way of breaking up the talk itself, and you just have to keep in mind which order they're in. And you know, and there was a time period when I was probably averaging over 50 trips a year. Now I'm down probably under 2 dozen. But I didn't know as a physician, that as an academic physician, that traveling was going to be that much of my life. I've had 28 mailing addresses, which is way too many. But I can also say that as much as I travel, it's actually all free. So if you like to travel, and I never thought medicine would be a way to get that advantage, and talk about academics and research. And I think I do really have the best job in the world. So I know that there are medical students here that have been working their butt off to get to where they have been. You made a good choice. There are people in the audience that want to get into that position, and it's the right thing to do. The payoff is really that good. And I ended up going to a place in Uganda, East Africa. My father was a doctor. He was a surgeon in Korea, and then he went to East Africa with other surgeons and with their families and did a Peace Corps kind of work for the government. So that's how I ended up there. And this is my number 10 best way to travel, because that's me on the hood with my brothers and my mother, and this was in the rural roads of East Africa. And the neat thing about that is that as a Korean family, we never knew we could have a car. So my father took some driving lessons, and we bought an Opel. And that's my father down in the bottom. And he worked at a little small clinic hospital, and there were actually 3 surgeons, and all of them were Korean. the surgeon back here, Dr. Kim, and his wife, who was also a surgeon, and then my father. And as a surgeon, he was doing everything, including primary care, delivering kids, doing operations, and everything like that. But while I was growing up there, I learned English, went to a British school. Uganda was a British empire, so the actual majority of the businesses were run by Indians, not American Indians, but from India. And this crazy guy took over the East Africa called Peter Rhee, and he wanted to take over all the businesses, so he banned all Asians from this country, trying to get the Indians out so he could take over their little small stores and shops. But we were Asian, so we got part of that, and we were actually evicted out of the country itself. And that was when my father took the opportunity, and he made a decision that he was going to go to the United States rather than to Britain. So that was his two options. So we went through Europe and ended up going to New York, lived in a hotel for a while, but he got his visa fixed, and then he finally got a job again as an intern. So he had to start all over in his training and did his internship, and he actually switched from surgery to anesthesia because the residency is shorter and the lifestyle is better. So here I am moving to Pennsylvania, and that's where I call home. I lived there for about 6 years, but I went to one full school, which is a high school. And so I kind of called Pennsylvania home. And at that time period, there wasn't many things I knew, but the one thing I knew at that time period was that I didn't want to be a doctor. So here I ended up coming back here to Atlanta to Georgia Tech. So you don't know what you don't know, okay? Obviously by definition. But I know that I didn't want to be a doctor. I came here to Atlanta to be not a doctor. And why? Because I was Korean, okay? And everybody pinched you in the cheek, oh, you can't be a doctor. The pressure from, my father never pushed me to be a doctor. My mother really didn't do it. She was hopeful, but she never said be a doctor, but she was praying that I was going to be a doctor. Okay, that's, I think, the Korean culture. So it's horrible like that. The pressure's already there, and I just didn't want to be a doctor. So I came here, and I knew I didn't want to be in the military. You know, when I was at Georgia Tech, I tried the ROTC program, and because they pay, and it wasn't going to work for me. But I tell you, with my father being a doctor, I had no idea what a doctor did. Okay, what my father did as an anesthesiologist in a little town is just such a small aspect of what you can do as a physician. So I eventually graduated from Georgia Tech. I had long hair, I had a mullet, but I got done with it. And you know, my father knew I was going to be an engineer and I wasn't going to be a doctor. But I tell you, I know how happy he was. Not as my mother was vocally happy, but I know my father was happy. But he heard I was going to, I was going to be going into pre-med, and I took my MCATs. And by the way, the MCATs matter a lot. So, I learned too late. I screwed up my freshman year. I messed up one quarter, and I started partying, and I dropped my GPA. And it took me 2 more years trying to get that up. Okay, and I didn't think I would make it, and Georgia Tech was really unnecessarily difficult. I know Dr. Choi's son is here, and you really torture yourself going to Georgia Tech. But, the MCATs, I took the summers off. All I did was study for the MCATs every single day, okay? So the MCATs in your grades, GPA, get you to the point where they'll even consider you as an applicant. And by the way, I heard the conversation. We are unfairly treated as Asians in this country more than any other race in the entire country by far, okay? And so many reverse discrimination rates. I know they were trying to be politically correct, but they don't compare me with the African Americans and the Indians or anything else. They compare me with myself, and that's just the reality. It's not fair, but it's just the reality. So the other time I think my father was so excited and happy was, I was applying to medical school, and at that time, I would say for the medical students here, they'll attest to this, but that sophomore, junior year, when you're going through the application process, is the most stressful time you'll have in your life. Once you get in, life is just infinitely easier. But during those years, when you're worried to death about everything all the time, it's a horrible time. But I applied to Morehouse because I was here in Atlanta, and they accepted one out-of-state person and one non-African American a year, so I knew I didn't have a chance. But I went there, I told them I want to help people, and actually I got in. I got into Morehouse, And then all my friends, wanted to get into Emory, and I actually got into Emory as well. So, but then my father told me about this school I never heard of in my life called Uniformed Services University. And I kind of don't know why he did it now. But when I looked at that program, I decided to go there because they paid more money, okay? I didn't want to go to medical school. I was just independent. I wanted to pay for myself. So the idea of going to the military, cut my hair and go there was absolutely the furthest thing away from me that I could imagine. But here I was eventually going to be a doctor, and then I was going to join the military. And I know that that was probably the happiest day of my father's life. Why? Next. I don't know why. I know why. Next. Because my father was in the Navy. Okay? He was in the Korean Navy. And that uniform is exactly the same uniform I wore, because after the Korean War, the United States military reformed all of our Korean military. So that's me in the same uniform as an ensign in medical school. But these are my brothers. My older brother, middle, and my oldest brother. My older brother actually joined the Marine Corps about 3 months before I joined the Navy. So it was just coincidental, but he wanted to be a pilot. And as a result of that, when I had to do military things in school, I actually went to see him and visited him. And he was married and he had a child, so I wanted to see the baby. And so I started doing things with the Marines, and that's how my life really changed. Here I am in my school. We have 150 students that graduate Army, Navy, and Air Force. And I would say for most of you who haven't considered it, consider it. It's a good deal, okay? I had a scholarship to Emory with the Army, but I didn't want to wear green, and that was the only reason, one of the reasons why I went to this school. And my father was in the Navy, so I picked it. But that's an example of how arbitrary your decisions are, okay? Lifelong decisions made arbitrarily for all sorts of crazy reasons. Met President Rhee because he was our commencement speaker, and I think that's when I started meeting all these presidents. But I ended up going to the University of California, Irvine for my residency, 5 years, so 5 years after medical school to be a general surgeon. And at that time, the reason why I went to UCI Medical Center for my residency is because the Navy was predicting a shortage of general surgeons out, and I was ranked the #1 intern in the Navy, so they paid for me to go to UCI. Now, but as a result of that, I incurred more years of obligation, and that's why I ended up doing 24 years. Went out to sea. This is number 7. It's another good way to travel in this world. It's unbelievable technology. To be on a nuclear aircraft carrier is undescribable. Doing surgery on the ship for a city of 10,000 people out at sea is absolutely thrilling as well. But after my time at sea, and I had gotten this approval a long time before I even went, I got an approval to do trauma surgery. Now, when I went through my residency, of course, I, like all Korean surgeons, wanted to be a plastic surgeon, okay? For obvious reasons, they make money, it's an easy life. So I tried very hard to be an anesthesiologist, couldn't do it, I didn't want it, I tried everything else. I thought I was going to be a neurologist, plastic surgery. But eventually, I was working at a place where there was a lot of trauma, and I saw what trauma was. And it didn't make sense to me to be in a specialty that the military didn't need as much. What the military really needed was trauma surgeons. My brother was a warrior, he was in the Marine Corps, and so for me, I gravitated towards it because I was good doing trauma. In the stressful time periods, I seemed to be a little calmer than most, and I think a little clearer. So I went to Seattle and went to the University of Washington, and their public school is called Kings County Public Hospital, and that's where I did my 2 years of training there, where you see a lot of very sick people. Back up and go once. Just give it a second. Hit it once. you're dying from bleeding to death, you can't drive in from home. So that's the reason why I live at the trauma center. And if you're not bleeding to death, I can take my time. But that's what the entire trauma system is really about. So at the end of my fellowship, I hated writing papers. I hated everything about writing. So I said, I want to do anything except academics. And please, they said, well, where do you want to go and work? And I said, I'll go anywhere in the world, just don't send me to Bethesda, Maryland, because I went to medical school there, and I hated the Bethesda, so they sent me to Bethesda. And I got hired as one of the assistant professors in the department of surgery to do research and also to teach medical students in how to do surgery. And that's when my life really changed. That was against my will. It wasn't something that I desired or wanted, but happy. And I got into the research world, which is I would say, for me today, the reason why I am where I am, and I've gotten to be able to achieve and get the job that I wanted, the position that I wanted, the city that I want, is because of research. The reason why I take care of patients, I think, better than most, and why I teach how to do it is because of all of research. I can't stress enough to you how important research is. As a matter of fact, when I was applying for my residency, the person I was interviewing with said, what do you want to do? And I told him what everybody told me. I told him, they said, I want to help people. That's what you say to get into medical school. But as a surgeon, they said, I want to be a good surgeon. And he took my folder and threw it, went sliding across the table, and he said, go apply somewhere else. We don't want your kind here. And I was like, what's my kind? And he goes, I don't need good clinicians, okay? All the community training programs can make good clinicians. I need scientific academicians. I need people who are going to take our field to the next level, show us how to do things, okay? That's what we want to train to do, okay? Which was really a mind-opening type of thought process, because I was at that point just trying to become a doctor and trying to do the minimum things. But now all of a sudden the bar was really set at a different pace. So I was in Washington, D.C., working at the Washington Hospital Center, which is their largest trauma center downtown. Next. And of course, there's parts of D.C. that's not so nice. Next. And this is my first patient that I took care of with a little 16-year-old kid who got a shotgun to the face. Okay. And during that time period, I started my research, and I got really super lucky with my research because it just started to pay off, and every time I was doing these experiments, things turned out really well. I started getting funding as a result, and the research that I did also changed the way we practice medicine in my field. Now, I'm not going to go into the details. I can go, I've got 380 publications, and I can go through all of the tables and slides with you and put you to sleep like you can't, like no one else can believe. But I'll forego that and say that I was interested in resuscitating the problems that we had when we bleed and get blood back. Next. And next. And it was also interesting because we were also redesigning how I was going to work in the military as a trauma surgeon. In the old days, Korean War, World War II, they would hit the beach, and then they would bring the tanks aboard, and they would set up a hospital, and then they would have the front lines. And the front line would go back and forth a mile, maybe in a day or so on. Next. Next. But nowadays, what they were doing, go back one, they were doing operational maneuvers from the sea because the technology had changed, and we could deliver our troops wherever we wanted without taking the beach, okay? So the question was, then how was I going to get to this guy who got shot in the abdomen when they're going hundreds of miles in a day and not 1 mile a day? Next. So the reason the technology changed is that we used to use these helicopters. This is what we used also in Afghanistan and Iraq. H-46, 58 years old, but they were coming up with these new helicopters that can fly like an airplane, and they can go further and further. They can go 400, 500, 600 miles. So my job was to design a way that I could get a surgical unit on one of these things to follow the troops into the battle. And go ahead, next. We designed a system. This is finally what we came up with. Next. New portable equipment, fancy little things in order to do this. And the thing was that I could come out of that airplane and within 1 hour be ready to take patients. Next. And during that time period, this is the fourth best way to travel was on Air Force One. I got to travel with President Clinton on his entourage going to China. Next. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about some of the other research that we did. This is on a situation where a person has died, and what we'll do is we'll open the chest in the emergency room. Next. And that's the way we currently do it. That's the standard protocol. If you came in and you just died, the last ditch effort is to open the chest and see if we can cross-clamp the aorta, which is your major blood vessel, save the blood from being leaked out so that your heart and brain won't die. Next.
That's good.
Sorry, the overall survival is very low. Next.
That's good.
Next. If you get shot in the abdomen, the survival rate is less than 5%. Meaning that if I do this 20 times, I might get one survivor. All right? Next.
Something.
So next. If you bleed to death, it's really impossible to get you back. When you have a heart attack, you do CPR, you can bring people back. But with bleeding to death, when you have no oxygen going to your body, your brain cells starts to die. Next.
Ooh, that's bad.
Okay, that's
Hello, operator, give me the number.
Yeah.
So
So this is our trauma team. This is the way we work. We get notification. You're getting CPR. Okay, next. So that's in LA County, another public hospital. We're opening 3 chests simultaneously. Doing the first one, the residents doing the second one, the medical students get the third one. They're scared out of their mind. And so we wanted to improve this way of operating. And without going into too much detail, if you have 1,000 people who are hurt in a war, what happens is that if you make it to the hospital, the survival rate is extremely high. And you can put a lot of money on trying to make the improvements of these people who got there. But the real bang for the buck are these people who died in the field. And the question was, is there a way we can try to keep them alive or suspend their life so that we can get them into a hospital? Next. And that's when I got into this research of suspended animation. We know that if you fall into a freezing cold water pool, and then you haven't been breathing for over an hour, you can still come back up and be normal. So it's this part about cooling your brain matter down as quickly as you can. If we can do that, then you can actually make it so that we can suspend life. Refrigeration is one of the most revolutionary things that I never thought of before, but it changed the way we live. The reason why we had cities was because we had to go shopping for food every day. You had to go to the butcher, and you had to go to the bakery every day. But now we can drive and put things in the refrigerator. And that's the reason why we don't have to live downtown. So next. So, but cooling people from the outside is very difficult to do. You know, we're not pigs. We don't have their skin, but we still have enough skin and fat that you can go into freezing cold water in New York City without dying. So cooling the brain through the outside is very tough to do. So the question was how to get your brain to cool down as quickly as you can. And I figured the best way to do it is just do it through the circulatory system. It's like a radiator to go through the whole body. I designed a methodology where I can get into the chest and infuse massive volumes of liquid in order to freeze your brain and your heart. Next. So dead. What is the definition of dead? Next. When your heart stops, are you dead? Next. When there's no blood going to your brain. Next. When you have no red cells in your body. Next. When you're cold, like the refrigerator. Next. And then when we execute prisoners, we use potassium. That makes all of your cells stop working right away. Heart cells, brain cells, kidney cells, everything else. So, next. So I found a solution which has high doses of potassium, and I would refrigerate it, make it cold, and when I would bleed a large animal. I used pigs for our experiments, and when they were died, I would infuse them with this cold solution. And by all definition, because they have potassium in their body, no blood in their body, and there's no heart activity, and there's no blood going to the brain, they're all, by all definitions, dead. Next. And this is me starting with the initial operation with some of my my medical school colleagues. But eventually we got to a system where we were able to get these pigs to survive. And we were able to get to a state where we did up to 3 hours of suspended animation and still bring them back. Next. And then the question was, can we do this out in the field? So we would use our rapid mobilized tents to do this so that you could actually do this in any place in the military. Because once you get into the helicopter, going from Baltimore to DC is only about a 15-minute flight. Okay, so if I buy you 3 hours, the idea is that I'm going to be able to scoop you up in the battlefield and bring you to the surgeon back in the rear. Next. So, sophisticated neural studies to show that the brain is still survivable and normal, but then there were critics that said, well, how do you know pigs they can read? Next. I said, they can't read anyways. Next. But we had to prove it, so this took years of my life to develop a system. Next.
I'll be back.
I'll just explain briefly what those pigs were. Those were pigs that had gone through suspended animation. And my job was to figure out and test their memory. Well, how do you figure out a pig's memory? And I don't speak pig, right? So I found a little system to do it where they would walk into the cage and they knew how to get to the blue box. The blue box had an apple. It's a lot. Next, if you look it up in suspended animation, Dr. Rhee, there's lots and lots of internet articles talking about this, especially since they were talking about going to the moon and then to Mars. Next. Just keep hitting. Yeah. Now it's not at a position yet where you can free someone for years or anything like that. But what it does do is now opens my mind to say, well, if you're dead and you can come back to life, it's not about life, but when does death start? Okay, when does irreversible death start? Because I just filled your body with potassium and it wasn't doing any metabolism for several hours and you were still able to come back. Because there's animals that actually hibernate, right? They dig down into the mud and the heart rate goes down to 1 or 2 and they survive without oxygen. The seals can hold their breath for an hour and a half. So there are chemicals and drugs that are out there that can actually stop life, but they're reversible. And now makes it so that that part of the world is now a new question in my mind as to how we can utilize this to our benefit. Next. But I had to stop this research because the Navy sent me out to sea again, and this is on a Marine Corps carrier. Next. And this is number 5, one of the other 5, the 5 best ways to travel. And that's a hovercraft. Go back one. This hovercraft, the idea of just floating on the sea and going somewhere was just, fantasy. But here we are. We will take tanks onto these things. They have enough engine power to float underwater, and we take it out there. It takes 3 pilots in that booth, and they let me pilot this hovercraft out in the back of the ship. So those carriers that I just showed you the picture of, they carry them in the back of that, and what they do is when they get to where they need to go, they will actually flood it and sink it into the water. The back door of the ship opens up, and these things will fly out of the back. And then during my times in the Navy, number 8 Elephant. Okay, next. Also got to do many things with the Navy, including a lot of humanitarian work. This is actually in Timor, East Timor. Next. And this is number 3, my 3rd favorite way of traveling, which is a spy rig. That's me, the little guy, the second spy rig. Next. So when you're flying up there on a rope, it's like actual flying like a bird. Next. So I came back from the Navy, from the deployment, on September 10th, okay? And my wife woke me up the next morning, turned the TV on, and I see this. I go back to bed. She goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, this means I'm going back out to the war." All right. And that's what happened. 2 months later, I was the first surgeon into Afghanistan. And the reason why I got chosen for that was because this group of Marines that were going out there was going into the middle of Afghanistan. You can't set up a Navy hospital there. A Navy field hospital takes 1,000 people. There's only 600 Marines there. So they take one surgeon and put him there with a new gear. So they had these people and this is interesting because that compound was in the middle of a lake that dried up, and they made it into an opium processing factory. And so our special operations shot everybody up, and we took over that base. And there I lived for several months. Next. And doing military stuff. Next. And it's interesting that these guys, if you remember way back then, I know most of the audience won't remember this, but the older people, when we went into Afghanistan, we lived in these foxholes like old in World War II. That's the way they lived. And the thing is that they're in this foxhole for 3 months. Next. Our Christmas tree, another Christmas out deployed. Next. And we took care of casualties, both Afghanistan and Americans. Next. Next. So when I came back from that, what we needed was a way to stop bleeding. So I got my laboratory, which was still functioning, and I said, I want you to use an animal experiment, and I told them exactly how to do it, and we tested some products next. And we ended up with QuickClot. QuickClot actually hit the major times. We were able to get the FDA to approve that in a record time of 4 months, and we deployed 40,000 units of this into Iraq. Next. Okay, this is a video which isn't working. This is good. We'll just go forward for the sake of time. Now this is the Army Master Sergeant when the bomb explodes when he sits on a mine, and the amount of dirt that's embedded into him is crazy, but he's not bleeding because the medics applied QuickClot to him. This guy with his missing extremity that's bleeding to death, the use of the QuickClot. Next. Next. We actually even made it to the cartoons because they were talking about QuickClot. Next. One more.
Yeah, well, he's been here twice. Unless he can stop the bleeding, we'll have to go to the hospital or a doctor. Doesn't really matter.
If I am lying dead by a dumpster, I'll be in 20 minutes.
This it's not exactly how we use it, but that get the general idea. But it's also very rewarding to know that your research really started off with an area of what's called local hemostatics. So my next stage of my life, this is my last stage of life in the military. I was assigned to LA County, and this is right after I came back from Afghanistan. And again, I was in a civilian hospital. So all of my training was in civilian hospitals, and most of my work has always been in civilian hospitals, even though I was active in the military at the time. And at LA County, the reason I got sent there, I opened up a little training center because the Navy people, this is the group that I went to Afghanistan with. Next. So these guys who are the military are the ones that are going to go out there and take care of your brethren who are in the war. We'll have guys who've been back up, or we've had guys who were in the military for 28 years but never seen a gunshot wound at all. And that's the benefit because we've been at peace for so long. The amount of trauma that the military sees is extremely small. Only during the height of the war do we actually get to see some of this. Next. So we bring these people in as a team, we would train them, show them how to take care of people in the LA County because LA County was full of people who were shot. Next. And then we would send them out to the war. Next. And then during that time period, however, things got really heated and they let me go back to the war one last time. So this is in Ramadi, Iraq, 7,000 miles away from LA. Next. Where you're taking care of these people who were bombed. The videos aren't working in this one next. Let's see, it's not working at all. So this is my hoosh that we built, but this was our everyday type of life where, right outside, as soon as you walk out, the video plays what it does is show the bomb coming down. You hear the boom that comes on every day. Next. Oh, this isn't working either. But the way we worked was just like in MASH. When it rains, there's mud on the ground. We're not really working in the nicest of environments. The operating room is not sterile. Next. Next. And you're just doing basically meatball surgery out there. Next. taking care of soldiers, civilians, and also the enemy combatants. Next. Next. Now, this was probably my biggest day that I had. This is the glass factory that was right outside the base. You could see the glass factory. There's snipers up there, so our snipers take care of their snipers. And then we were recruiting Iraqi people to become military. And when we have a big congregation like that, we know that there's going to be a bomber. So we take extra precautions. But there's a bomber there anyways, and when the dog sniffed out the bomb, he exploded himself. We had 200 people within 10 minutes from that. And this is our hospital, you know, in the dirt in Iraq. Next. Now, but the research that I had done previously allowed us to do something that hadn't been done in the field before. These are guys from Ohio, and they are not, in the military, for every one guy that holds a gun, you need 2 other guys to give them the bullets and the food, okay? So these are guys in the base working to get the guys, you know, who are going out into the field. But they're not needed out in the field right then, so what they do is they lay down on the ground, next, and they donate blood. And we take the fresh blood from them and we give it to the dying person, because we didn't have the capability out there of having Red Cross bring stored blood. So we were actually using fresh blood, which actually was the first time to be done. Part of the research that we had done before, we were able to show and prove that it works and show that the way we were resuscitating the civilian world was completely incorrect. Next. This is my medic. He says, Doc, when I see one of my brethren coming in and he's on the OR table, I can't help you, but I can give my blood. And then that's our chaplain giving blood. And then we would fly them out on these helicopters. This is HC-46, the back of these helicopters. Number 6 best way to travel. One of the Army guys, he wouldn't let me treat him unless I attended to his dog first. Next. Number 2 best way to travel, Bradley. Okay, next. They let me drive this thing. My son loves this much. He says I look like a North Korean. I drove that tank with no instructions. And this is a high-powered rifle, but you know, compared to a tank, it doesn't compare. Next. The best part about being in the military is that you can operate in your shorts. And when I finally came back from Iraq, I got this picture. That's not me. That's Colonel Rhee. That's my brother. During his last deployment out there as well. We both got promoted at the same time, and then we finally retired at the same time as well together. LA County, again, the reason we went there, next, is because in LA, the city of angels, next, where only the strong survive. The amount of violence in that city is just unbelievable, next. But I went to Arizona afterwards, next. That's where the Grand Canyon is, next. The Sonoran Desert. Next. Arizona, they like to dot their I's. But it's also the Wild West, just like all of the cities in the United States are. 6-year-old shot in the head. Next. 9-1 shot. Got shot 9 times. 95 Next. A daily occurrence in the United States. Now, this is what I do for a living. Nice walk. So, these are daily occurrences. My number one reason why I'm there is because of car accidents. 75% of my population of patients are from car accidents. Next. But gun violence, what we call penetrating trauma. Gabrielle Giffords was a congressman who got shot in the head. Next. Next. And I was the trauma director at that time that ran the mass casualty. And I think the care was good enough for whatever reason, the press started to focus on me. And as a result of that, I gained some unwanted fame. Next. Next. And as a result of that, I also met some famous people. Next. And so I should go back. So she invited me to her box in the State of the Union address. Next. Next. And I can tell you that they're both very tall. So that's my wife, and we're at the state dinner with President Moon, South Korean President Michelle, and Barack Obama. That's me. And this is the other Korean guy who's most famous. That's Harold from Harold and Kumar. Next. As a result of that, I also got to meet several of the other Korean presidents. Next. Next. And I did that because, go back one. That's Anthony Rio Ragosa. He's the mayor of LA, and I knew him real well because I was the trauma medical director in LA. Next. Number 9, best way to travel is a pink Cadillac. I was the Grand Marshal of the Irish Parade, which makes no sense. That's Mark Kelly, Gabrielle Gifford's husband, and he and I got to be good friends because he's also a Navy captain, retired in Tucson, and we became golf buddies. She's done very well. That's Mark in the back. His brother just came back from outer space, the longest history of any man out there, Scott Kelly. Next. 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 So one of the things that we do is we always take our residents and fellows out to the range and shoot, just to get a familiarity and an orientation. I was in the military, so I shot every single thing you can imagine. But we're on a routine basis just because of the amount of gunshot wounds that we have in this country. Next. The second amendment thing, next, which is total BS, and it made a lot of sense when we had musket guns, okay, but nowadays it's just, it's obviously a glitch in the rules that lets them buy all the guns they want. Retail gun stores, $51,000, McDonald's, $14,000. It doesn't make any sense. And how many times are you going to shoot a guy, right? Next. Next. Gun stores. I know you guys don't do this, right? Next. 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 Okay, that's the United States over there. The amount of privately owned guns compared to the rest of the world. Now, out of the years, we had about 450 people, 450 United States military people killed in action from battlefield injuries. Of that 450, about half of them were from bombs, the other half were from bullets. Therefore, about 200 to 250 people at the height of the war were being killed by bullets in Iraq. In the United States of America, next, on a daily basis, we have 32,000 people a year killed by bullets. Okay? We were up in arms, about 250 American soldiers dying per year, and we have 32,000 people being killed by bullets every year. There's someone that is killed every 16 minutes, someone who's shot every 4 minutes. Next. Next. So, we got bad news. Next. There are all sorts of problems such as global warming and weather changes and flooding and pollution. And then, the nuclear bomb threats as well. But, go back one. But, in the military, we're taught when everybody tells you, when the gauges tell you that things are going bad, the first thing you're going to do is look outside the window. Next. And I gave a commencement speech for University of Arizona when I talked about this, because most of the commencement speakers sometimes talk about very depressing things to say, next, the world is also good. How many billions of people can the world hold? Okay, so now, You know, we're doing a lot of good things. Today is a good day. So if you read my book, that's one of the main things that I talk about is why today is such a good day. When I went to college, we didn't have this. Go back one. Yeah, right there. This is what I did at Georgia Tech. Okay, I had to do punch cards. Okay, we didn't have computer screens. Right? Do I look that old? Next. And if you dropped your cards, that took you several hours. This is our Palm Pilot. And when those things came out, and then there was car phones, right? That was just only, you know, this was the Motorola flip phone, and I had one when I was with Clinton in China. And we just thought that was the most unbelievable spy kind of stuff you could actually have. You know, without a cord, you could get, it was crazy. Next. There were a ton of crazy stuff and memorized unbelievable things. And everything that we were taught back then is irrelevant now. Next. You know, 50 years ago, if I told you I'm going to take a heart out of a dead person and put it into a dying person, it was inconceivable. Okay, heart transplant was inconceivable. Next. I'm Korean, I wear glasses. If I told you I could shoot lasers in your eyes, you don't have to wear glasses. Okay, how much of a fantasy is that? And that's a reality that we have every day. Go back to the Roman time periods, the Egyptians. Take any of the empire states, the British Empire. There's never been a time when the human society has been as prosperous as it is now. And medicine is also part of that, and that's why research is absolutely so important, that you play that role, so you're just not practicing and you're not part of the crowd that's following. But you want to be one of the leaders out there determining which direction we go. Next.
Everyone ready?
All right.
1, 2, 3.
So, again, this is why I do what I do. This is why I love my job. Because these are the residents, the trainees that we operate with, that we're in the battle with, that we're in the battle zones with. Next. We go to meetings together, we present information, we are a piece of that society where we are furthering ourselves with vision and changing the way we practice. Our team of people, and the joy it takes when you lead people to do what you want to do and take them to greater places. This is one of the Marines that took care of the Ramadi. You'll see what he does, he tattoos the Marine Corps signet on his arm next. But he also tattoos his name, his blood type, his religion. Military medicine for me is just a pure honor. Okay? When I went to the military medical school, the deal was very simple. Okay? At peacetime, they pay. They pay for my education, they pay for my books, they pay me a salary. It's not a lot of money. And in 24 years of not getting paid a lot of money. That's okay. But if there's a war, it's my turn. I pay. As a trauma surgeon, there's nothing more fulfilling than to go to the war and help these people. Because I get to help, because I get to work for a country that lets me take care of prisoners, that takes me to take care of children, civilians, as well as their own soldiers. Right? And they pay me while I'm doing that. That's just an absolute privilege. I don't go to the war shooting people. I don't go to the war, I have to carry a gun just because of the regularities. But I'm not going out to the front and have to make a decision as to whether I'm going to squeeze the trigger when I see a target in front of my barrel. Okay? I am a physician. I'm a military physician, and it's just nothing but pure honor and privilege to take care of these people. Next. When others started to wake up, I was being greeted by the troops, and every time they'd see me, they'd say, "Good morning, Captain, how are you doing today?" And I'd answer my usual stuff, which was, "You couldn't get any better." You couldn't get any better. Now let me explain why I say you couldn't get any better. It seems like a sick answer, you know? Someone who's at war, seeing all the horrific, nonsensical injuries that come in on a daily frequency. I also wasn't with my wife and kids, so why would I say you couldn't get any better? Well, to me at that time, that's how I felt. I chose the military for the money. The deal was pretty simple. They pay, and if there's a war, I pay. That was the deal, straightforward, simple. They paid for my training, now it's my turn to pay back if the country was at war. Next. So, the reason why I wrote this book is because they paid me a lot of money. Okay. I wrote this book because over 250 million people know what a brain surgeon is, but probably less than 50,000 people know what a trauma surgeon is. So my mother still doesn't know what I do. And I think for especially, you know, when I got, you know, the good parts about Gabby Giffords and the fame is that the Korean, the country of Korea is now developing a trauma system because they had not had one before. But then when they heard about the trauma surgeon and the trauma system, the people in Korea went to the government and said, why don't we have a trauma system? So I go back on a regular basis to help them formulate their system, and also they come here to the United States to Grady to learn and train. Grady has a 25% penetrating trauma rate. It's probably one of the highest volume. I get 10 gunshot wounds a single night all the time. The amount of guns that we have in the city of Atlanta and in the United States is absolutely preposterous. So F-16 Thunderbirds is the #1 best way to travel. Next. For some reason, everybody likes to see me pass out. Okay. No, we do get $1.35 a day, right? Best job I ever had. Best job I ever had. Best job I ever had. I got the best job. And that's the end of the talk. So, thank you.
Now, if you have any questions for Dr. Rhee, please ask.
한번 조금 들을 수 있어요. 지금 내가 말할 때는 괜찮지만 내가 한국에 가서 텔레비전 보면은 뭐 말하는지 몰라.
Okay. After you graduate the test, you don't have any experience of with it. And how do you become
So you applied to the Uniformed Services University. You applied to the Uniformed Services University, which is the military academy, medical academy, just like you would any school. Their application process is the same as any medical school. The interview process, everything is the same. They do, however, pay a little more attention to people with prior service. So there's a lot of older people married with kids and also who have been in the military before, pilots, infantry officers, ophthalmologists, physical therapists, corpsmen, medics. All of those people apply, and they get looked at a little bit closer. But I don't think my application was any better than anybody else's. My GPA wasn't that great. It was 3.4 out of Georgia Tech. My NCAT scores were a little bit better than average. My application, my statements and stuff like that, I relied on that like everybody else. I don't know what got me in. The interviews, I don't remember anything particular about that. But once you get in, if you sign in and say I want to do it, I went down to, I think, Dobbins Air Force Base down south here for my physical examination. If you pass that, you go and swear in, and then you go to, for me, I went to my, it's in Rhode Island, there's a school in Rhode Island where they show you how to wear uniform and how to salute and things like that. They show you the regulations. And then from then on, you just go to school and you're an active duty officer during that time period. Very easy. Any other questions?
Young Asian kids growing up in the U.S., do you recommend U.S. military as an option? Or is it for certain types of kids, do you think?
I recommend the military because I had such a good time in the military. I don't know if that's going to be true for everybody. Everybody's individualistic on that. But I mean, that's an option that I was completely against, right? But when they dangled the money in front of me, I took a closer look at that whole process. To be honest with you, that was the sole reason. I wasn't patriotic. I didn't want to wear uniforms. I didn't want to march. I didn't want to do any of those kinds of things. But I don't think I would have had anything that I experienced and showed you here today, including my job today, without having gone through that. I'm not sure. If I had gone to Duke and started the whole process, maybe not. I don't know. But I do know that I always said yes to opportunities, and I've always been happy about that. I'll repeat your question.
So, based on the previous experience being maybe trauma director or it sounds like you had a lot of experiences building the program up. How has coming to Grady where it's a lot more established? What is this?
Grady's not established. It was the worst program to ever take over. When I went to Tucson, there was one other trauma surgeon there, and I started that program. We got national within 9 years. We were publishing over 70 papers a year at the end of my time that I was there, before I got recruited here. Building programs, the leadership role of building programs is so much fun, okay? You have a vision, you know how it should work, you get the money for it, you hire people, you recruit them to come to your city, bring their families with you, they work for you, you're their boss, you take care of them as a family member. You do that to your nurses, you do that to everybody else, and you build your program. That is so much gratification. Okay. Came here because Grady, the trauma program here was never verified as a trauma center. I got it verified last year, the first time in its history, meaning a national governing body came in and said you had done all the things you're supposed to do to get to that status and level. It was also, the reason why I came was because it was a leadership challenging point for me. I was at a point in my life where I was looking for something more invigorating, and Grady suffered from one problem which is unbelievable that it's actually occurring today. And we all know it occurs today. We know how bad racism is, right? We suffer reverse racism at the worst format you can ever imagine. We are penalized for being Asian to every degree. The worst thing, if it makes you feel any better, be glad that you're in Georgia and not in California. Okay, you need a 4.9 to get into medical school if you're Asian in California. It's just crazy ridiculous over there. And those poor kids, they suffer heavily from that. But Grady was problematic because they had two medical schools. One was a predominantly black medical school, and the other was a white medical school. So one of my jobs was to integrate the two systems. I'm the opposite of Obama because I'm 50% not black and 50% not white. So I think I was uniquely qualified for this job. So we had 5 surgeons when I started here a year and a half ago. We have 14 trauma surgeons working for me now. Any other questions? Did our time? We use a robot right now. I bought a robot for Grady last year, $1 million, and we have just done 180 cases on the robot. Okay, 180 cases. We did 180 cases in this last year on the robot. So the robot, we will be doing it in 50 years from now. the robot surgery, we're doing probably 70–80% of all the surgeries that we do. But the robot doesn't do it by themselves. It's a human. No, it's a human moving the arms. Okay, they sit at one console and it works over there. And what it does is, because you can see much better than that when you're standing there yourself, and your hands can move in manners that you can't do. And then you can do it through little holes instead of doing big incisions. And so there's going to be a huge part of it, like microsurgery will be infinitely easier to do and so on. But the one thing the robot probably won't be able to do is what I do. Trauma surgery with bleeding people all night long. Mentally, yes. No, I've never been hurt from violence.
At what point in your career did you get your master's in public health?
So I got that after my general surgery residency. I went out to sea for a year, and during my trauma fellowship, they allowed me an opportunity to get a master's in public health. Did it help me in my career? It did a little bit. I don't know if that little bit's a lot. The environment that I was in was very heavily academic. Grants, and it taught me how to write grants. It taught me a lot of statistics. The rest of the stuff probably wasn't that big a deal. You know, I was a surgeon, board certified, going to these classes. Going to college at that level is completely different. You're a sponge, because your brain can focus on what you want to do. But you know, the one thing that I'm not interested in, I disagree with, is the medical schools right now are turning out just inferior products, for one. Okay, because they've cut their hours, they cut how much they have to do, so now the residencies are getting longer and longer. It takes 7 years to become a general surgeon now instead of 5. When you come out of medical school, you're not, you know, when we were going through medical school, we're doing procedures, we're doing things in that type of stuff. And then the medical schools, what they also do is that the push towards primary care is just immense, right? Now, well, I did the same thing. I said I want to be a primary care doctor, and that's how I got into Morehouse and all those kinds of things. That's before I realized what they do. So, you know, I like what I do. I like, when I'm working, it's red hot, okay? It's not a boring day. When I'm working, I was on last night, and the number of cases I did, 4 o'clock this morning, this guy came in with a perforated duodenum from being assaulted. His pancreas was transected in the OR for 4 or 5 hours. Not only just making decisions on how to do it, but doing and performing it, keeping him alive. That stuff is really exhilarating. Okay, thank you very much.